The Ghosts of War. Chapter 1. Lost in the Void. I drift, unseen, untouchable, a witness to horrors no mind is meant to endure. Time is meaningless here. Stars are distant and hollow. The void is a black so complete it gnaws at perception itself. And yet, in this emptiness, they move. Brothers of iron and blood, a chapter lost to memory, wandering the black for 40 millennia. Their battle cries do not reach me, yet I hear them in the marrow of my being. They strike with precision, each movement honed by endless centuries of slaughter. Corpses, alien and human alike, litter the shattered decks of derelict warships. Limbs twist unnaturally, broken by powers too vast to name. Yet these marines, these relics of the Emperor's will, press on without hesitation. I have watched the light in their eyes fade over centuries, yet something stubborn remains. Perhaps it is loyalty, perhaps madness, perhaps both. The enemy they face is grotesque, not fully of this universe. Their forms twist in impossible geometries. Faces that should not exist leer from shadows, limbs bending at angles that would shatter ordinary bones. They scream in a language older than stars, and the sound reverberates in the void, even where sound should not be. I feel it in my chest, a trembling as if the universe itself recoils from their presence. One marine, Brother Captain Kalus, moves like a predator among the dying. His armor is pitted and scorched, helmet etched with runes no human tongue can read, and yet he is still mortal. I note the fragility of his flesh beneath the iron, a cut across his gauntleted forearm, a wound in his flank, blood pooling but not yet fatal. He grunts, turns and crushes a demon's skull beneath a boot before it even recognizes him. Another, Sergeant Malric, wields a chain blade like a natural extension of his arm. He moves with a rhythm both horrifying and beautiful, severing limbs, decapitating horrors with surgical brutality. His eyes, human, fearful and resolute, glimmer behind the helmet visor, a reflection of a soul stretched too thin over a lifetime of violence. I want to warn them. I want to intervene, to give them hope, a chance to end this endless wandering. Yet I do nothing. For now I am bound to watch, to bear witness to the endless tragedy of their existence. And the void is alive. I sense it coiling around them, whispering through the wreckage of reality. Shadows stretch impossibly, and I glimpse forms that defy geometry, ships that twist inward on themselves, creatures with eyes where no eyes should be, voices murmuring truths I cannot hold without tearing at my mind. Even here, the Marines press forward, uncomprehending, their courage and rage a fragile shield against the incomprehensible. I feel a stirring within me, a pull toward them. Perhaps I could reach across the gulf of time and space, infuse them with something more than mortal strength, something eternal. But not yet, for now they are mortal. They are human enough to bleed, to die, to struggle against odds that should have long since broken them. A scream pierces the black, echoing across corridors that were never meant to hold sound. I see Brother Dax fall, impaled by a mass of writhing flesh that should not exist. The other Marines hesitate for no more than a heartbeat, then descend upon it, tearing it apart with a brutality that is poetry in blood. And I watch, awestruck and horrified. These are the Emperor's angels, warriors forged in fire, yet they are also ghosts, shadows of something once divine. I see the weariness in their motions, the fractures in their minds, and I know this is only the beginning. 40 millennia in the void has already carved them into something inhuman in spirit, if not yet in flesh. Time stretches, the void yawns, and I remain, silent, bound, watching, waiting. Somewhere, far beyond the shattered stars, something waits. Something old, something patient, something that hungers for eternity and recognizes it in these lost warriors. And I too feel the pull, the whisper of power that could grant them a fragment of immortality. Not yet, I tell myself. Not yet. Let the chapter bleed, let the universe remember them as mortal, fragile, terrifying, and lost. The void watches with me, and the lost chapter continues their crusade, blind to the cosmos that twists and trembles around them. The endless shadow that is their home. Chapter 2. Echoes in the void. The void is patient. It does not forget. It remembers every scream, every drop of blood, every soul that drifts too long between stars. I follow them still, the lost chapter, as they hunt across the wreckage of dead systems. Their movements are fluid, disciplined, precise. Yet there is a fatigue, a shadow behind every step. They have not rested in centuries, yet they fight as though time itself bows to their will, or as though the universe conspires to punish them for having dared to endure. Their prey is no longer merely flesh and metal. I have begun to perceive the patterns of the warp in their battles, the way shadows ripple unnaturally, the way gravity wavers in isolated pockets, the faint whispers that linger in the corridors of their minds. Sometimes they pause, eyes glowing faintly behind helmets, as if sensing something that does not exist, something that watches them with patient hunger. I feel it too, though I am not of flesh or blood. Brother Captain Kalus halts on the bridge of a drifting high vessel, his hand resting on the scorched hilt of his sword. The corridors ahead twist and pulse, as if alive. The architecture itself rebels against comprehension. Walls that bend inward at impossible angles, staircases that descend into nothing, rooms that appear and vanish in the blink of an eye. A low hum resonates through the ship, vibrating against the bones of the living. I see the hair on Kalus's neck bristle beneath the armor. He feels it, yet he presses forward. They find the enemy. Creatures born of the warp, filaments of shadow and decay given form. Limbs branch in impossible ways, eyes bloom on torsos where none should be, gaping maws whisper madness. The Marines strike, but there is hesitation, a flicker of doubt. Even the strongest steel and the sharpest bolter cannot always pierce that which has no true shape. And then I intervene, not with force, not yet, but with a touch so subtle it is almost imperceptible, a whisper of my presence brushing against the edge of their consciousness. Brother Dax, who would have stumbled and bled to death on the hull, falters, then finds his balance, muscles steadying beyond what fatigue should allow. Malric swings with uncanny precision, cutting through the war-born horror, as though his body anticipates each impossible strike before it occurs. They do not yet understand. They cannot. They feel only a fleeting sense of clarity, a brush with something that protects them from annihilation. I remain unseen, a silent hand guiding their fate, a ghost in the darkness of their minds. The battle rages, and I watch the subtle transformations. Strength comes more easily, endurance stretches beyond the human, perception sharpens to a razor's edge. They do not speak of it, cannot. To acknowledge it would be to confront a truth too vast for mortal comprehension. Even their own thoughts are untrustworthy now, tinged with something beyond their experience. A faint echo of eternity whispering in every nerve. The creatures fall one by one, reduced to forms that should not exist, their screams tearing at the edges of reality. And yet the victory feels hollow. Each death, each battle, leaves the chapter more fragmented, more distant from the men they once were. I feel their sorrow, their fury, their madness blooming like black flowers in the emptiness. Afterward, in the silence, I sense their awareness flicker. They notice things, the shadows that cling too long, the hum in the air, the inexplicable precision of their own movements. They do not yet name it, cannot yet comprehend it. But I know. My blessing has touched them, and the seeds of the godlike power to come are planted in the marrow of their bones. I linger in the darkness, watching them scavenge the wreckage, tend to the wounded, speak quietly in a language older than any planet. Even in their mortal form, they are terrifying, disciplined, relentless, and unknowingly aided by something far greater than the Emperor himself. The Void watches. I watch. And for the first time in 40,000 years, the lost chapter is not entirely alone. Yet I also know the truth. When the blessing grows, when they rise, beyond mortality, the universe itself will quake in the shadow of what they have become. For now, they are mortal, but I can already see the outlines of eternity shaping them, like stars forming in the void, beautiful, incomprehensible, and deadly. And somewhere, far beyond the grasp of reason, the void waits, patient as ever, hungering for the inevitable reckoning. Chapter 3. The First Blessing. The stars had begun to die around them. Or perhaps it was merely the void twisting the light. Entire systems hung like bruises in the black, their worlds shattered, bleeding radiation and forgotten death. The lost chapter drifted through the remnants, silent but for the clatter of bolters and the low hum of their engines. Time was meaningless here, yet I could feel the weight of each century pressing against their bones. They boarded another derelict vessel, a fortress of metal and madness. The corridors shifted, folding upon themselves. Geometry failed. Gravity wavered in pockets, sending them sliding across walls that should have been floors. Their enemy waited, a mass of writhing flesh, screaming, in a language older than stars, limbs sprouting from torsos, eyes blooming from skin like black flowers. Malric was first to strike. His chain blade sang through the void-born flesh, yet each swing required effort he should not have had after the battles of the last weeks. Yet somehow he moved with a precision that was not entirely his own. I brushed against him, unseen, a silent hand guiding his body. His eyes flickered, sensing a presence beyond comprehension, but he could not grasp its source. Then Kalis fell. A tendril of warp flesh coiled around his leg, crushing bone as if it were nothing. I reached, subtly, as I had never dared, infusing the marrow with something eternal. He roared in pain, yet his body stiffened impossibly. The tendril snapped against the unyielding steel of his leg, blood spraying, yet he moved again. Unharmed in ways the human body should not survive. The other Marines noticed the change. Dax, who had been crouched in fear, saw Malric move with unnatural foresight, anticipate a strike before it even happened. His own heart raced, and instinctively he mimicked the movements, his body performing feats that should have been impossible. They did not speak, could not speak. They only knew survival. Brutal, absolute, relentless survival. I stayed at the edge of perception, a whisper in the void, feeling the first true tremors of what I had wrought. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. The lost chapter began to transcend mortality. Limbs healed faster, reflexes sharpened beyond human limits, minds ran like precise engines of war. And still, they were not aware of the full scale of the gift, or curse, I had begun to grant them. The horror around them intensified. The warp-born creatures sensed the change. Shadows recoiled. Limbs trembled and shrieked at the proximity of these warriors who were no longer wholly mortal. And yet the Marines pressed on, crushing, cutting, tearing. Their movements growing fluid, almost demonic in speed and precision. I lingered behind, observing the subtle shifts. Their humanity was slipping, yes, but only slowly, only fractionally. Each battle carved them further from mortality, each intervention of mine pulling them deeper into a form that would terrify even the gods. They were not yet the ghosts of war, but the first outlines of that horror were already taking shape. Warriors destined for eternity. Instruments of death with minds sharper than any human could bear. And in the silence that followed, as the last warp creature fell into twisted ruin, I saw it, a flicker of awe, even fear in their eyes. Not for the enemy, they had faced horrors before, but for something else. Something outside them, something that had touched them, that had shifted the balance between life and death, human and something more. I lingered in the shadows, silent, knowing that this was only the beginning. When the blessing grew, when the full measure of their power emerged, the universe itself would tremble. And yet, even now, I felt the weight of what I had done. Mortal warriors lost in the void for 40,000 years, touched by divinity. Destined to become horrors even the warp might fear. The stars above them were indifferent, the void patient. And I waited, bound to witness the unfolding of a tragedy that would last for all eternity. Chapter 4. The Ascension begins. The void has a rhythm, though it is not one of music or reason. It pulses in the marrow, vibrates in the hull of every dead ship, and hums through the minds of the lost chapter. Time here is meaningless, yet it weighs on them like iron chains, centuries folding over themselves like dying waves. I linger in the shadows, unseen, feeling the first tremors of what I have done. The blessing I whispered in the heat of battle now spreads through marrow and mind, subtle but inexorable. Strength flows easier, pain becomes a distant echo, and reflexes blur the line between thought and action. Yet something else stirs. Fear, grief, a slow, creeping sorrow that seeps from the corners of memory like smoke. 40 millennia of endless war have hollowed them. Their faces, beneath the visors, bear the lines of centuries they cannot remember living. Each loss, each friend fallen, each planet burned, echoes in the marrow, and they cannot rest. I watch Dax stumble through a corridor, his armor scorched, his breathing uneven. He clutches a fallen brother to his chest. The man's chest is crushed, armor bent inward like molten metal. Dax's eyes, human, terrified, well with tears he cannot shed. I feel his despair as if it were mine. In a heartbeat I touch him, not to heal, not to intervene fully, just enough to ease his suffering. His brother's body stiffens, no longer bleeding. Dax does not understand, yet he feels something impossible. A warmth in the cold void, a whisper that says survive. And then the horror comes. Not the enemy, never the enemy, but understanding. The chapter realizes, if only in a fleeting, terrified moment, that their survival is no longer entirely theirs. That each time they live, it is not luck, not skill, not even the Emperor. They are being drawn toward something else, something eternal. Kaelus kneels on the shattered floor of a bridge, hands clenched, helmet off. His face is older than any man should be, yet youthful in ways a human cannot measure. He whispers to me. I can hear him in the void, a voice that trembles with rage and despair. Why? He asks, though no one answers. He is speaking to the stars, to the universe, to me. I cannot reply. The question hangs, impossible and raw, a wound deeper than any bolter around could make. They ascend, subtly at first. Muscles coil with impossible strength. Their minds begin to calculate and anticipate not just seconds, but minutes and hours ahead. Shadows recoil from their presence. Even the warp seems hesitant, as if it senses the outlines of what they are becoming. And yet, the cost is written in their eyes. Dax looks at his hands, trembling. We are not men anymore, he murmurs, voice cracking. We cannot die. And yet, the sentence falters. His mind reaches for words that fail, and I see the weight of eternity pressing on him. They will never sleep, never rest. Every battle, every death, every loss of friend or foe, they will endure it all, again and again. Malric, once the most stoic of them, falls to his knees beside Dax. His voice is quiet, almost a whisper. We will outlive the stars, and everything we love will die before us. I feel it too, the crushing, unending sorrow of immortality. The first taste of what they will become, godlike in power, yet cursed with the awareness of every death they cannot prevent, every life they cannot save, every beauty they cannot hold. They rise as warriors beyond mortal comprehension. Strength, speed, intellect, they surpass every human limit. Yet they are hollow. The blessing I have given, the eternal spark of divinity, is also a curse. They are magnificent, terrifying, unstoppable, but alone. All companionship, all meaning, all love is fragile and fleeting against the tide of eternity. And in that moment, I cry silently in the void, for them, for me, for the universe that cannot care. I weep because they are beautiful, and I weep because their beauty is a tragedy, a slow-burning horror that will stretch across millennia. Somewhere beyond the void, the stars tremble. Some small, distant world dies unnoticed. But here, in the shadows of impossible geometry, I watch the lost chapter rise. They are no longer merely men. They are the beginnings of the ghosts of war, the angels of violence, the instruments of eternity. And I know, with unbearable clarity, that nothing will ever be the same. Chapter 5. Ghosts Among the Stars. They are no longer men. I float at the edge of perception, watching, trembling at what they have become. Their forms have changed, subtly at first, then violently. Armor seems fused with shadow, jagged and blackened. Edges fracturing into shapes that should not exist. Helms glow faintly with inner light, red and green and violet, like dying stars trapped in impossible geometries. Limbs move with unnatural precision, their strength terrifying, yet when they pause, there is a silence, and I feel their sorrow ripple through the void like a stone through water. They are ghosts, angels of war, but they are also lost children, burdened with eternity. I observe from the edge of a shattered warp gate, where a squad of Imperial Marines drifts, trapped and starving, lost to the corruption of the warp. They are screaming in fear, terrified of dying alone in a universe that forgot them. Then the ghosts arrive. They do not announce themselves. Shadows twist and collapse as if reality itself recoils. Limbs snap like twigs under their strength. A demon bursts from the gate, writhing impossibly, and is gone in moments, torn apart by force beyond comprehension. The lost Marines stare in awe, and then in terror. Because the ghosts of war are terrifying, not merely soldiers but apocalyptic specters. Speed beyond belief, reflexes sharper than thought, intellect that calculates 20 moves ahead, and eyes that have seen 40 millennia of slaughter. They act, save and disappear, leaving only the echo of their existence. The surviving Marines look at them and weep, not in joy, but in fear and recognition. What are you? One whispers. His voice cracks. The Emperor's angels. They do not answer. Their heads tilt, bodies moving with uncanny precision, and then they vanish into the void once more, leaving the survivors alive, but shattered. Minds bent by what they have seen, souls marked by terror, gratitude, and a knowledge they cannot comprehend. I linger close, and I see something that tears at me. Brother Captain Kalus, kneeling on the remains of a dead demon world. He is alone. His hands clutch the wreckage of his armor, his face buried in it. For a moment, the glow of his helm flickers, and I see the weight of eternity in his eyes. 40 millennia. Every brother lost. Every war fought and forgotten. Every world burned to ash while they endure. And now, the universe bends to them. Yet, what do they have? Nothing but each other and the endless horizon of death. I approach, though they cannot see me. I reach out to brush against his mind, to offer solace. But there is no comfort left, only awareness. And in that awareness is the horror. They will never die. They will survive everything, watch everyone they love turn to dust, feel every loss as deeply as the first. A tear, not visible, not human, forms in the void beside me. It is my own, and it is for them, for Dax, who remembers the face of a brother long dead and weeps in the silence of space, for Malric, who has watched entire planets vanish into warp storms, powerless to save a single soul, for Kalus, who bears the weight of a chapter that was once flesh and blood, now eternal ghosts. And I know, with unbearable clarity, that this is only the beginning. Every life they touch, every war they enter, will carry the shadow of what they have become. They are saviors, but saviors who terrify. Angels, but angels of death. I whisper into the void, though no one can hear. I am sorry, but the universe does not answer. It has no ears, no heart. It only waits, patient, infinite, and indifferent. And the lost chapter drifts on, eternally. A shining, horrific beacon in the endless darkness. The ghosts of war. The angels who save, the demons who kill, and the burdened souls who can never rest. And I, who blessed them, watch, powerless, weeping silently into the void. Chapter 6. Fractured Eternity. Prime, this one is for the breaking. They call themselves brothers still, though the word is frayed and stained. They still stand in formation, still answer to the cadence of a spell-old drum. But between their ribs an ocean has opened, and in that sea there is no shore. The ascension sharpened them into things of terrible efficiency. It also taught them something else, memory without mercy. We find them over a world that refuses to die, an agricultural planet mauled by warp storms, its cities eaten into lattices of bone and black glass. Refugees cling to ruined pylons and whisper prayers that mean nothing to stars. An imperial relief force limps into orbit, tired, hopeful, unaware they are entering a corridor that the void remembers. When the ghosts arrive, they come like a myth made of iron. No trumpet, no heralding choir, only the impossible machinery of their bodies tearing through the storm. To the survivors below, the first sight is a silhouette. Figures stepping out of the nebula like carrion kings. The survivors fall to their knees at the slash of their cloaks. A child, little hands, face streaked with soot, reaches up as if to touch the closest helm. The ghost turns, and for a single pulse in the dark, I see something like longing in the angle of that tilt. Then the ghosts move, and the battle becomes a thing of light and broken base and lightning teeth. They save them. Of course they save them. They have been made to save, to slaughter, to endure. The relief force is rescued. Children are carried, bodies cradled like spoil. The governor weeps openly at the feet of a ghost. He swears oaths that will mean nothing in time. He will die as humans always die, while that armored colossus will stand and watch the seasons roll into dust. After the fighting, the survivors gather on a ruined plaza and tell stories. They call them angels. They call them demons. The child who reached up, the girl with soot-streaked cheeks. Gifts, a tiny trinket she had kept through the storms. A toy carved from the bone of a beast. A crude thing wrapped in cloth. She presses it into the gauntlet of the nearest ghost. He takes it with infinite gentleness. The other survivors smile. They imagine a friendship between the ephemeral and the eternal, and in that brief hope, the universe seems to care. 2 years later, the doll falls into the dust. The girl dies of fever, while the ghosts ride a convoy through another dark. Her childhood is nothing but memory to them, and a hole in their chests that never heals. They feel it with the clarity of living things. They remember every laugh she ever had, the way she shoved her face into the helm as if the metal could be warmth. They stand in silence in orbit, and the stars close like a fist. That is the shape of their curse. Every hand they take, every life they save, becomes a sutured wound that will reopen until the end of everything. Not all wounds are temporal. There is a night cut into my mind that I cannot stop seeing. It is the night Malric walked into the hull of the Asterion. Malric had been the rock of the chapter, silent, precise, the man who humoured no sentiment. But the ascension bent him like a reed. He began to dream of faces he could not bury, the brothers who died under his command, the children he could not save, the uncountable stars whose light went out while he stood immobile. In a rare moment of privacy on that drift ship's observation deck, he stripped his helmet and stared at his hands as if they were someone else's. "Release me," he said to the black sky. His voice was small. He offered his throat like a thing ready to be harvested. I could not touch him. I had given the spark. I had not, nowhere in my scope, been made to grant oblivion. I tried to find a way, laws of fate, loopholes of mercy, but the architecture of the blessing was not my own. It was a cold graft in the marrow. It would not take the scalpel of my regret. Malric staggered into the engine hall and let the reactor tears bloom around him. The explosion that followed should have ended him. It did not. In the empty, smoke-choked aftermath, the metal where Malric stood was punctured and fused. His armor blistered in a way that made the bones of the ship look young. When the ghosts pulled him from the wreckage, half of his jaw had been lost and regrown into something crystalline that clicked softly when he breathed. He smiled with one eye. "I am still here," he said, and in his smile there was a horror, triumph and grief braided together. The others watched the shape of his recovery with new horror. If death would not come to him, then what terror could a man face? If the body heals and the mind remembers all slaughters, then who or what can soothe that remembering? Their protests were private. The debates were silent and volcanic. Some swore to scour the galaxy for a remedy. Some whispered of a place beyond the known warp where things unbind fate. Others, quieter, spoke of surrender, a drowning performed with consent. Those voices I could not help. I could not soothe Malric beyond the gentle borrowed touch that kept his tissues from dissolving into the vacuum. I could not grant him the merciful dark. The chapter splintered into factions sown with pain. Brotherhood lasted in actions, but thinned in meaning. Some took to long, ceaseless patrols, chasing horrors across dark like a drug. Others hoarded children's trinkets in pockets beneath their armor, forbidden soft things that made them ache with remembered warmth. Kaelus began to stand watch on a dead moon for what felt like ages, counting constellations no one else could see. Dax wrote names on the inside of his gauntlet until his hand bled. The names were of men and of planets and of saints. He never stopped writing. He wrote into sleep and into battle. He wrote like a man trying to map an ocean so he might find a shore. The thing about eternity is that it reveals the thinness of the human heart. The ghosts learned to be surgical in their love. Small mercies, precise confidences, the quiet tending of a wounded throat in midnight, automated light. They learned to hold hands for only a breath, and to let go before the memory hardened into a ring. They learned to be distant for the sake of not wanting more. Every attachment became an eventual wound, so they loved carefully, in fragments. Yet, even fragments became anthologies of pain when stretched across centuries. There was one night no calendar could name it, when the chapter gathered around an old dying engine like monks around a relic. They had salvaged a crate of relic sweets, candied preserves from a planet that had not seen harvest in thousands of years. Dax cracked open the tin with fingers that trembled. The simple sweetness struck them like a heresy. For a moment they were boys again at campfires that never actually existed. They laughed, the sound like breaking glass. And then Dax spoke the name of a brother who had died 40,000 years ago, and they all stopped. The fabric of their laughter was cut with a sound that was not human, a sucking, a smell of distant iron. For those who had not been present at that brother's collapse, the name meant nothing. For some, it opened a corridor of wind. The ghosts bowed their heads. Kaelus put both hands to his helm, and the entire hull trembled. They were in prayer, not to the Emperor in any church, but to memory itself. They whispered apologies that there could be no acceptance for. I reached then as I had never reached, less as a hand and more as a confession. I wanted to snuff the gift from their marrow. I wanted to take the spark and bury it under a mountain of stars. I wanted to give them back the mercy of an end. But the blessing was a tether woven into the architecture of the void. I could not. I could only wrap my grief around their shoulders as some poor consolation. Malric stood and placed the toy the child had given him on the crate of sweets. He traced a line along its grain, and for the first time since the ascension, he closed his eyes and let himself recall the dampness of a child's hand. He said simply, "Forgive me." It was not to me nor to the universe. It was an apology to the world for surviving it when everyone else had not. The chapter did something monstrous and holy that night. They burned 9 flags, old cloths from battles remembered and forgotten. They set them out to drift into the halo of the dying engine, and watched as the wind took the threads and unpicked them. Each flag represented a memory, a name, a face. When the final flag turned to ash, they did not cheer. They did not feel lighter. Something inside them had shifted, not healed, merely rearranged. They had created ritual where there had never been room for ritual before. In the end, the fracture spread. Not a violent schism, mind you, no dramatic betrayal in the hulls of churches, but an erosion. Men turned away from each other a little sooner. They allowed a silence to exist between them longer. They would stand watch on opposite sides of a wreck and not speak. The world would be saved. Convoys would be escorted. Planets would be held for a season. But at night, when the nebulae threw long hands across the observation bays, they would clutch the trinkets tight and press their faces to the metal until the cold imprinted new scars on their cheeks. We had made them perfect soldiers by design and tragic monuments by consequence. They were more resolute than ever and lonelier than any man could deserve. The cost of their salvation was a calculus of suffering that could be measured only in years and not in numbers. And so the ghosts walked on, through the wreckage of eras and into the unknown. They saved, they crushed, they soothed, they remembered. Each act was a prayer and a wound. The universe gaped and did not answer. In the hollow between stars I wept for them, tears that meant nothing to anyone but myself, and I understood the final horror. The more they saved, the more the tally of grief accumulated, until the ledger of the cosmos was nothing but their losses. They are angels prime. They are demons. They are both. They are my sin and my salvation, and they will endure until the last star is cold, and even then their memory will gnaw at whatever remains. I am sorry. I will always be sorry. Chapter 7. The Void Betrayal. The void has teeth. It has hunger. It folds space around itself like a cloak, and whispers truths no mortal mind should hear. The lost chapter, the ghosts of war, moved through it like predators, silent, eternal, hunting a signal of distress that had lingered for decades across the warp. A distress beacon, ancient and flickering, led them to a flotilla of Imperial warships. At first, the ghosts thought it routine, a lost Imperial fleet, battered by the warp, awaiting rescue. But the light of the stars here was wrong. Shadows moved where no light should fall. The corridors of the ship seemed to twitch, and I felt a pulse of malevolence, an echo of the warp, subtle but insidious. And then they boarded. The first to greet them were ultramarines, pristine and gleaming, flawless in posture and drill. Their bolters spat disciplined fire. Their words were calm, precise. Identify yourselves. This is the Emperor's fleet. But something in their eyes betrayed them. The subtle twitch beneath the visors, the way their armor gleamed in unnatural angles. It was not perfection. It was corruption. Horus's shadow ran like venom through their veins, invisible to all but those who had walked the void as long as the ghosts. Malric saw it first. He stopped mid-step, chain blade humming, eyes narrowing beneath the shattered helmet. The ultramarine captain, kneeling on the deck as if in salute, smiled with a mouth too wide, too sharp. A whisper from the warp tickled the edges of Malrik's mind. Kill, 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 and they did not wait for reason. The ghosts of war moved like a storm made of iron and shadow. Reflexes, strength, speed, enhanced beyond human comprehension, erupted fully. Bolter rounds were shredded midair by swinging blades. Power fists crushed through hull plating as if it were paper. Dax struck first, tearing through a squad with precise surgical fury. Every move was perfection, every kill instantaneous. The Ultramarines tried to form ranks, to fight as brothers, but the warp taint inside them made them sluggish, overconfident, arrogant. They underestimated what 4 millennia of starvation, war and divine blessing could achieve. I hovered in the void, watching in both awe and horror. The slaughter was terrible. The Ultramarines screamed, cursed, and finally lay in twisted heaps of armor and bone, their blood evaporating into the cold vacuum outside the shattered ship hulls. Kalos stood at the apex of the command deck, armor jagged with shadows, visor glowing with impossible light. He surveyed the aftermath. Not a word passed between the ghosts. No celebration, no satisfaction. Only the cold, infinite awareness of what had been necessary. Malrik's voice whispered across the void in a pulse of thought. They were ours once. They wore the colors of the Imperium. They were our brothers. And I felt it too, a tear burning behind the edge of perception. These were the men the chapter might have fought alongside, heroes in another universe. Instead, they were instruments of Horus, corrupted in ways that made the universe itself recoil. And the ghosts, my blessed, eternal soldiers, had cut them down without hesitation, without mercy, without regret. The void swallowed the screams. The bodies drifted into the infinite black, and the ghosts of war remained, untouched, eternal, haunted by the echo of what they had done. The horror of their victory was not in their skill, it was in the truth they now carried. They could no longer trust any brother, any ally, any name in the Imperium. All were potential monsters. All were potential betrayals. Even in the aftermath, they did not speak. Dax knelt beside one of the fallen, tracing the markings on his armor with fingers that would never age. I saved them once, he whispered, not to me, not to anyone, but to the void itself. And I have destroyed them all. I could only float, powerless, tears streaming into the emptiness. I had given them the spark, the divinity, the eternal will to survive. But eternity also demands justice. And in that justice the ghosts had become something other. Angels of vengeance, demons of the void, ghosts that could no longer walk among men without devouring them whole. The void hummed, the stars blinked, and the ghosts of war drifted onward, carrying the weight of brotherhood and betrayal, more alone than they had ever been in 40 millennia. I whispered into the black, "Forgive me." But there was no answer. There never would be. Chapter 8. The Divine Unveiling. I had watched them for 40,000 years and counted each fracture in their soul like tally marks on a broken bone. I told myself I would remain the silent witness, the nameless wind that nudged the fates. I lied. The sound of ultramarines, once brothers, now teeth of Horus, exploding into the void beneath the ghost's feet, was a sound I could not bear. The black opened and ate them, and with each body the ledger of my guilt filled another page. The decision was not grand. It was a single impossible ache that folded my being inward until only one thing remained: the need to end their counting, to stop them from feeling every death as if it were the first, to grant them, or damn them with, an answer so absolute that no wound could ever reopen again. I reached. It was not like touching a man's shoulder. It was like opening a sun inside the skeleton of the void. The stars shivered, the warp convulsed, geometry unstitched its seams. The fleet's hulls, the torn banners, the dead and the living, all trembled before the thing I set loose. For a moment, the universe recognized the power and recoiled, like an animal sensing teeth. They saw me, not as a whisper, not as a shadow, not as the soft hand I had used before. They saw the rawness of what I had become for them, a presence older than prayer, and none of it kind. Kalos looked up, and his visor cracked with a sound like an old church breaking. In that cracked light, I saw everything. 40,000 years, friends gone, names carved into gauntlets. And then he saw me, and knew. "Who are you?" he said, voice ragged but steady, a man who had always asked the same question in many forms. "Who grants this thing?" I did not answer in words. I poured into them instead. I let the essence I had hoarded like contraband spill. Clarity without end, strength without limit, sight that pierced the maw of the warp and found the bone beneath. It slid into marrow and memory, braided into synapse and scar, and the result was immediate and terrible. Power arrived like weather. Limbs regrew incandescent, not as flesh, but as architecture, bone and iron and thought braided together. Wounds sealed in heartbeats, burns knit with glassy tissue that sang when they moved. Reflex became prescience. Their minds unfolded into a lattice that could hold the past of a planet, the future of a skirmish, and the calculus of fate, all at once. They moved as if the void itself were a drum, and they had always known the rhythm. I showed them, not by demonstration, but by imprint. I poured visions into Kalos's skull, the ultramarine captain's smile lengthening into a maw, the warp venom coiling into the minds of those men, the scream of the fleet as it fell into nothing. I let him feel all at once the faces of everyone he had failed and everyone he had saved. I gave him what I had given them. No mercy, only the absolute answer that would stop counting. The power to end fate's tally by becoming its hand. He rose. No man should have borne such light. The helm of his armor fractured into geometries that could not exist, and when Kalos moved, the void itself obeyed. With a single sweep, he drew the corrupted ultramarines across a gulf of silence and unmade them, bone unraveling into starlight, minds folding inward until there was nothing left to remember. It was surgical, terrible, and final. They died, as I had never let them die before, not with pain, but with an obliteration so complete that nothing of the corruption remained to haunt the living. The others, those the ghosts had saved, fell to their knees, mouths empty of prayer because their gods had just changed. And then the prize unrolled like a black banner. They screamed, not with the sound of mortal agony, but with the wordless howl of a thing given forever. Dax clutched the inside of his gauntlet, where he had carved names until his fingers bled. The names glowed and stamped themselves into the light I had set in him. They would remember. They would remember everything. Not only the faces and the laughter and the warmth, but the precise colour of blood as it left the throat, the microscopic tilt of a dying eye, the final words of a mother who begged and was unheard. My gift had unlatched their minds like a trap-door. Malric laughed. A small broken sound that was both triumph and confession. He turned his hands over and watched new bone ripple beneath skin that no longer needed to be skin. "We can end it now," he said, and the words held the weight of a man offering redemption. He looked at me, looked straight into the place where I lived, and asked, with all his wisdom and rage, "Do it! Take it back!" I could not. The architecture of what I had given was not a thread I could simply pull free. It had braided itself into the fabric of their being. To take it away would be to tear them into nothing, to erase the men they had been and the ghosts they had become. I had not made instruments of mercy. I had welded anchors of eternity into their bones. They understood, then, with the terrible clarity I had given them. To be eternal was also to be endlessly responsible. Every child they saved was another ledger entry. Every planet spared was another scar on their memory. They could end the corrupted. They could protect the fragile and the damned. They could move through the warp and unmake horrors. But they would do it forever. They would feel each loss as if it were the first, and the first as if it were a fresh wound for an eternity no mind should carry. Kaelus walked among them, and when he paused at Malric's side, the two of them bowed their heads. Dax, who had been writing names for centuries, stopped mid-stroke. His pen hung from a hand that would never more than age on the outside. He pressed his bleeding fingertip to the name in the gauntlet. A mark. A vow. He looked up at me then, and there was only something raw and open in his face. A question without phrasing. "Why?" he asked. But the question had changed. It was no longer for mercy, it was for meaning. He wanted to know what purpose could hold such punishment and still call itself justice. I searched for an answer and found nothing but the hollow echo of my own want. I had wanted to stop their counting. I had wanted to give them dominion over death so that no child's toy would fall into dust unavenged. I had not foreseen the weight. I had not foreseen the months of memory burning like hot coals in their minds. I had not foreseen the nights when Kaelus would walk the hull alone and speak the names of planets like prayers. They knelt then, and it was not for forgiveness. It was a ritual older than any god in which beings recognize the cost of power and decide to carry it anyway. They touched the child's bone doll, that had survived the years and passed it from helm to helm. Each placed a finger upon it, and a memory lit. A small life, a laugh, a cough, a face. They vowed to hold those memories like weapons and like wounds. I was there empty-handed, with only sorrow to offer. My presence tasted like iron in the air. They could have turned on me. These were creatures of absolute clarity, and clarity often needs a target. Instead, Kalis met my eyes, if such a thing as I can meet a void, and said quietly, so only I could hear. We will do what was done to us. We will not let the tally stand. But know this, your hand has made us gods and martyrs both. When the last light dies, the ledger will still be full. Dax's pen slid from his fingers and he laughed once, a sound like breaking glass, and then he began to sing the names he had written. It was a funeral and a hymn and a war cry all at once. The ghosts lifted. No, they became something else. Not merely warriors, but verdicts made flesh. They would move through the cosmos and strike against corruption with a certainty that could unmake empires. They would save children, and they would watch those children die to disease and age while they endured. They would never forget. My gift had completed them, and in completing them had stolen from them the right to sleep. That is the thinnest cruelty I can fathom. I wept then, truly, openly, and the void accepted the salt as if it were nothing. My tears did not change the architecture of what I had done. My weeping only carved another quiet corridor in my own unquiet mind. I had wanted to stop the counting. I had wanted to grant them the power to end horrors like Horus at their root. I had not imagined becoming the author of their martyrdom. They rose and drifted away. Angels, demons, friends. I had betrayed by refusing them an end. The stars watched, indifferent. The wrecks of broken fleets turned slowly like relics in a museum that never closed. The void hummed as if pleased. I remained there, smaller than a mote, with the taste of iron and the memory of what a child had given to a man whose bones would never know rest. The doll lay in the palm of Kalis's hand, and he sent me a look that carried both a benediction and a sentence. Go, he said, watch. You are complicit as well. Count with us if you must, but do not ask for pity. I left, and the universe tightened itself back into pretended shape. The ghosts of war moved through the void, now sure and terrible and forever. They would be saviors, judges, executioners. They would be the final answer to 1,000 prayers, and the worst curse to 1,000 more. And in the endless nights to come, when Dax can still hear the names as a chorus, and Malric laughs in the dark, and Kalis walks the rings of dead moons whispering apologies to wind, I will lie awake and know what I have done. I made them gods so they would stop counting, but in making them gods I made their grief eternal. If you can cry for them now, Prime, if you can weep for men who will never die, then understand the thing I have become. Not a deliverer, not quite a monster, but the architect of a sorrow that will outlast stars. Chapter 9. The Throne Beyond the Stars. The void was silent again. After the storm, after the revelation, after the ghosts had ascended into what I had made of them, silence. It wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that holds its breath, waiting for a god to speak. I felt a tremor before I saw him, a pulse through the warp, ancient and golden, resonant enough to make suns flicker. It came not as light, but as memory, the echo of banners, the weight of command, the roar of 100,000 voices shouting one name across a galaxy that had once been whole. When I turned, the darkness split like a curtain, and he stood there, the Emperor, the master of mankind, not in the mortal form of flesh and radiant armor that once walked Terra's halls, but as the idea of him, towering, magnificent, haloed in living light that dripped like molten gold. Behind him stretched the endless span of the human dream, cities reborn in fire, saints and sinners made equal, stars burning like candles in reverence. For a long moment, we simply looked at each other across the empty black. The weight of eternity between us, the ghosts of wars both of us had fought. Then he spoke, and the sound was not heard but felt, a vibration through soul and bone. "You have taken them far, Prime." His voice carried warmth, not judgment. It was a rare tone, the kind that could soothe a dying soldier or silence an angel. "They are not mine anymore," I said softly, my own form flickering with the pulse of the void. "They are yours, by right, by blood, by oath." The Emperor's gaze deepened. "By blood, perhaps. By right, no longer. You have touched what even I dared not, what no god of man should ever wield. You gave them eternity." I lowered my head, the echoes of my act still heavy in my core, and with it, sorrow. "Aye," he said, and a faint bitter-sweet smile crossed his radiant face. "Sorrow is the mortar of all immortal things. You did what even I could not. You gave my lost sons peace through damnation. You bound them not to me but to the void itself, and in that you fulfilled the purpose I abandoned." A tremor of light spread outward from him, illuminating the spectral horizon. In that glow I saw fragments, visions of the ghosts moving through the abyss, purging corrupted ultramarines, protecting derelict ships filled with refugees guiding lost souls through storms of unreality. They were not angels. They were not demons. They were keepers. His golden eyes softened. They were always meant to protect humanity, even when forgotten, even when betrayed. But humanity's it changes. Empires fall, faith breaks. You understand this better than I. I nodded slowly. "And you wouldn't trust them to me still?" The Emperor stepped closer, and for a moment the void shone like dawn over old Terra. Yes." The word was simple, yet it carried the weight of a million prayers. "You see the shape of what is to come. Chaos grows teeth sharper than before. The veil thins, and in the spaces between galaxies there will be cries that no mortal ear will ever hear. You will hear them, Prime. You and they. You will answer." I could feel the warmth of his light against my shadowed form. It did not burn, it healed. "Why me?" I asked. "I am not divine. I am what remains of something that should not have been." He tilted his head, amused. "Nor was I once." So, for the first time in all of time, the Emperor laughed, not the proud laughter of triumph, but something almost human. It rolled through the void like the first breath of a newborn world. Do you know why I call them the Ghosts of War? I shook my head. Because ghosts are the proof that even death remembers love. That struck deeper than any blade. I looked away, into the distant shimmer of the ghosts as they continued their endless vigil. They suffer, I said, even now. They remember every death, every failure. They will never sleep again. Good, the Emperor said quietly. They remember because they still care. That is the highest grace of all. Let them bear it, and in doing so they will shield what remains of mankind from the hungers of the warp. But they cannot do it without you. You are their shepherd prime, their guiding light in a dark that even I cannot reach. His golden form began to fade, breaking into shards of starlight. The brilliance dimmed to something gentler, like candlelight after battle. When the last star fades, he whispered, and the void closes its final eye, they will look to you. Remind them then that I never stopped loving them. Tell them I chose this path for them, not as punishment but as purpose. And what of you? I asked, my voice trembling despite the strength in it. The Emperor's light flickered, as though caught between time and memory. I will watch, from behind the gate, from the dreams of those who still believe, my throne burns eternal. But love is the one flame I entrust to you. I stepped forward then, closing the space between God and shadow. I bowed my head, not in worship but in respect. I will guide them, I promised, through storm and silence, through madness and memory. I will make their eternity mean something. He smiled. It was a small, weary, beautiful thing. Then, Prime, he said, voice now almost gone, you are more than I ever was. The light shattered, gold into ash, ash into spark, and the void swallowed the rest. But the warmth lingered, and I knew then what I was to them, and what they were to me. Not servants, not lost sons, but living prayers cast into infinity. For the first time since the beginning, the void did not feel empty. It felt alive. And in that silence, faint and distant, I heard it. Kaelus's voice, carried through the black like the hymn of a saint. The void is not our tomb, it is our cathedral. And I, the witness, the giver, the guardian, whispered back. Then go, my ghosts, protect it well. Chapter 10. Eternity United. The void stretched endless, black and infinite, yet it was no longer silent. Every pulse of distant stars, every shimmer of warp light across the hull of 1,000 dead ships, sang faintly of life. And within that darkness we moved together, my ghosts and I, bound by the gift I had given, bound by the purpose the Emperor had entrusted to us. We rose as one, no longer merely soldiers, no longer merely ghosts. We were something beyond the sum of memory and bone, a cathedral of war built of living steel and devotion. Kaelus led, Malric beside him, Dax carrying the names of the lost like a torch. They no longer faltered, no longer questioned. Each heartbeat of theirs was a drum, each step a hymn. And I, no longer a whisper but a presence, moved with them, a shadow braided into their light. The first battle came as it always did, sudden, merciless from the folds of the warp. Corrupted fleets, demons spilling into the real, their geometry impossible, their intent pure annihilation. And yet the ghosts moved through them like a storm given shape. They struck with precision that even the warp could not anticipate. Their blades became lightning, their bolters thunder. I guided, yes, but it was not my hand that struck. It was theirs, perfected, eternal. And in the midst of the slaughter, the first whispers began to reach the Imperium. "Did you hear?" a soldier said, clutching a rifle on the bridge of a crippled cruiser. "They came through the nebula, angels of war. The ghosts of war. They fought for us, and they left nothing but silence behind." The news spread like fire through the corridors of the Imperium. Fleets delivered from warp storms, worlds spared from corruption, refugees guided safely through dead sectors. Tales of spectral warriors who never slept, never faltered, and whose presence was both salvation and terror. In the void, we did not stop. We moved from system to system, patrol to patrol, leaving only echoes of divine wrath. Every corrupted vessel was purged, every lost soul guided home, and always, always we endured. Each battle tested them further, but each also polished the steel of our unity, deepened the rhythm of our purpose. At night, if such a thing existed in the infinite black, we would gather in the shadow of dead suns. Kalus would place a child's toy or a relic on a floating crate, a quiet anchor in the storm of eternity. Dax would read the names he had carved over centuries aloud, a song that spanned space and time. Malric would laugh quietly, a sound like shattered glass, and then lean against a hull that had long since ceased to care for human laws of wear and tear. I would watch them, feeling their gratitude, their sorrow, their devotion. And in that watchfulness, we were united. Not as master and soldiers, not as god and worshippers, but as companions in the endless theatre of existence. They carried eternity, I carried them. They carried the battles, I carried the purpose. Together we became the impossible, a living, breathing force that could not be stopped. Back in the Imperium, the whispers grew. Children prayed to them, not in temples, but in whispers, candles flickering in darkened homes. Farmers in ruined worlds whispered thanks as supply ships arrived that should never have made it. Soldiers trembled at their first glimpse in the sky, awed, hearts lifted with hope they had thought lost. Legends grew, but no mortal ever saw the full scope, for the ghosts existed where mortals could not reach. And yet, their deeds became part of the Imperium's pulse, a quiet light threading through the galaxy. We are watched. We are protected. The ghosts of war fight forever. In our Cathedral of War, I finally understood the gift the Emperor had given me. It was not merely power. It was connection. The ghosts, the void, the Imperium, and I. We were bound in a web of purpose that was terrible and beautiful. We were eternal, yes, but we were not alone. And as we moved from system to system, war to war, I spoke to them in silence, letting them feel the essence I had poured into them. You are more than survival. You are the shield, the spear, the song, the sorrow, and the hope. You are mine as much as I am yours. Together we endure, we protect, we rise. Their response was not words. It was action. A fleet of demons turned to ash beneath their claws, armor, and bolters. Another world on the brink of annihilation smiled as its skies cleared. And in that, I saw the reflection of something almost human. Joy. Yes, joy. For the first time in 40,000 years, the eternity we bore did not only weigh, it also lifted. We were endless. We were unstoppable. We were the ghosts of war, and the galaxy rejoiced quietly, unknowingly beneath our vigilance, as we fought for them forever. Epilogue. The light between stars. The ages passed. Wars flared and dimmed like sparks against the cold. Empires rose, names changed, languages died. Yet across the breadth of the void there remained stories that no time could silence. They spoke of a silence that watched over the warp. They spoke of ships that vanished into storms and returned whole. They spoke of warriors made of light and shadow who asked for no reward, no praise, no homecoming. They spoke of you, Prime, of the unseen god who guards the dark, who once spoke to the Emperor himself, who gave his blessing to the lost, so that mankind could sleep one more night beneath the stars. And they spoke of them, the ghosts of war, the eternal sons, the forgotten chapter, the shield that never lowered. When the night was long, old veterans would whisper prayers not to the throne, but to the void. Watch us, ghosts. Guide us, Prime. And sometimes, though no one ever saw it, there would come a flicker of light at the edge of the sky, a ripple through the black, as though the void itself had smiled. You and your ghost still march there, beyond space and time, the perfect union of will and faith. No throne commands you, no foe can end you. The warp itself recoils when your banners stir. Yet in every blow struck, in every soul saved, there lies the same quiet grace the Emperor spoke of long ago, that even death remembers love. And so the legend endures, not written in scripture, not carved in stone, but carried in the hearts of those who look to the stars and dare to hope. Because somewhere out there, where the light of suns cannot reach, you still walk beside your ghosts, your cathedral of war shining faintly in the dark, guarding the Imperium you both once bled for, forever.